The desert held its breath as moonlight glazed the salt flats, and coyotes fell silent like a church after midnight. Jack Hawthorne said, "Tonight ends the running." Spurs chimed behind him like coins on a coffin lid. Sheriff Cole Maddox said, "Easy, son, turn slow." Jack tasted iron and dust, and the wind carried a memory of gunpowder and a ruined wedding day. Eli Turner said, "Jack, there's 3 more in the ridge." Jack's jaw locked as the church bell in his mind tolled for promises he broke. Maria Devereaux watched from the balcony of the shuttered saloon, eyes like smoke curling from a fuse. Amos Pike said, "Pick your ground, boy. Death loves the careless." A rifle cracked, tearing the night, and a lantern burst, flinging shadows like knives across the boards. Jack said, "You took my brother, Cole. You don't take my soul." Boots thundered, a mare shrieked, and the town woke to the color of fear. Dawn bled into the town like a slow apology, and smoke clung to the eaves. Jack Hawthorne said, "I buried a brother on this street." Eli Turner said, "Cole made it law to forget him." Amos Pike said, "The law remembers what it profits." Jack traced scars on the saloon door, counting ghosts with his thumb. Maria Devereaux said, "Your grief is loud, but not unique." Jack stared at her, and guilt folded like paper inside his chest. Cole Maddox said, "Business resumes at noon, and so does order." The undertaker wheeled a plain box past, and the wheels squeaked like a confession. Jack said, "Order is just fear in a fancy vest." The sun climbed, and the town tried not to look. The saloon smelled of stale rye and scorched oil, and the mirror held a cracked sky. Jack Hawthorne said, "He died asking for rain." Maria Devereaux said, "Rain does not bargain." Eli Turner said, "We could ride by dusk and cut north." Amos Pike said, "Running chews the same leg twice." Jack set his revolver on the bar like an oath wearing boots. Maria poured 2 fingers and did not drink. Jack said, "Cole sold this town to fear, and fear wants interest." Eli blinked hard, chasing courage down his throat. Amos Pike said, "Then buy your ground with patience." Outside, boots gathered like thunder waiting for lightning. The church sat on a knoll, white paint peeled like old lies. Jack Hawthorne said, "He should have wed here, not bled here." Eli Turner said, "We put his name where Cole can't erase it." Amos Pike said, "Names last when deeds do." Jack set a tin star on the step, not a badge, just a memory bent into shape. Maria Devereaux said, "Grief makes brave men brittle." A lark sang, and then thought better of it. Jack said, "Cole will come for noon collections and leave with nothing." Bells did not ring, but their silence cut. The wind flipped the tin and showed the dent where a bullet had stopped too late. Noon rode in, hot and unforgiving, and the street stretched like a drawn blade. Sheriff Cole Maddox said, "Tithe your peace, or I'll collect interest in laid." Jack Hawthorne said, "Debt's on your soul, not our pockets." Eli Turner said, "We stand, Jack, we stand." Amos Pike said, "Stand smart, not tall." Maria Devereaux said, "Choose words that leave room to live." The crowd thinned to windows and keyholes, hope hiding with the children. Cole's deputies spaced wide, eyes hungry for permission. Jack stepped into the glare, and his shadow reached first. He said, "This town cashes a different currency today." The clock over the bank clicked toward its next breath. Jack Hawthorne woke before dawn, staring at the horizon painted in rust and smoke, feeling the ache of choices yet to be made. Eli Turner said, "You don't sleep because you dream of graves." Jack said, "I don't sleep because graves keep dreaming of me." Amos Pike said, "The desert remembers everything, even the sins we forget." Maria Devereaux walked barefoot across the veranda, her voice soft as glass, saying, "Vengeance burns hot, but leaves you cold in the marrow." Jack's jaw tightened, and he said, "It's all I have left." The sound of a church bell drifted over, cracked and lonely, as Sheriff Cole Maddox's men drilled in the square. Eli clenched his fists, whispering, "If we let him win, we bury truth with silence." Jack's eyes were shadows as he said, "Then we don't let him win." The morning crowd gathered at the market, whispers running faster than coin, each word about Jack like sparks in dry grass. Eli Turner said, "They fear him more than Cole. Maybe that's hope." Jack Hawthorne said, "Fear ain't hope, it's a leash." Maria Devereaux said, "Leashes break when the master grows careless." Amos Pike said, "A town that trades courage for bread starves twice." A woman selling apples pressed one into Jack's hand, eyes trembling with unspoken plea. Sheriff Cole Maddox's voice rolled from the steps of the bank, sharp as iron, "Law keeps you safe, not ghosts with guns." Jack threw the apple into the dirt and said, "Ghosts keep score longer than law." Inside the barn, shafts of light cut through gaps in the boards, falling across crates of smuggled rifles. Eli Turner said, "This is more fire than we can hold." Jack Hawthorne said, "Then we aim it true." Amos Pike said, "Guns don't weigh heavier than guilt." Maria Devereaux ran her fingers across a rifle barrel and said, "Cole will smell blood if these vanish into your hands." Jack said, "He already smells it." Eli looked at Jack with fierce admiration, whispering, "You'll give us a fighting chance." Jack shook his head, "I'll give you a choice, not a chance." The rifles gleamed like sleeping vipers, waiting for dawn to wake them. On the ridge above town, the desert spread endless, and the sun beat down like a hammer. Jack Hawthorne said, "Every horizon looks the same when you're hunted." Eli Turner said, "But we can make this one ours." Amos Pike said, "Ours only if we bury fewer than we lose." Maria Devereaux said, "Hope is a coin, Jack, and it spends faster than bullets." Jack looked at her, voice flat, "Bullets don't spend, they collect." The wind tugged hats and scattered grit across their boots. Eli stood tall, saying, "We're not running anymore." Jack's silence agreed louder than any oath. That evening, lanterns flickered in the saloon as a storm brewed far to the west, thunder rolling like muted drums. Jack Hawthorne said, "Cole's power ends tonight or never." Eli Turner said, "We stand with you." Amos Pike said, "Standing is costly when the ground is graves." Maria Devereaux said, "You fight for revenge, Jack, not justice." Jack's hand trembled as he poured whiskey, spilling more than he drank. He said, "I fight because silence killed my brother." The storm flashed, lightning cutting silhouettes of men arming outside. Eli whispered, "Then let's make the storm ours." The sun bled across the desert sky, and the church bell tolled like a warning no one wanted to hear. Jack Hawthorne said, "Cole will choke this town till even the air pays tax." Eli Turner said, "Then we breathe fire back at him." Amos Pike said, "Fire burns both hands when you throw it." Maria Devereaux said, "Men who fight Cole end with graves or debts." Jack's fists curled as the dust carried the echo of marching boots. Sheriff Cole Maddox stood on the courthouse steps, voice booming, "Obey, and you live. Resist, and you're dust." Jack whispered, "I'm already dust." The people watched from shutters, silent as graves. The ground shook beneath their fear. Night fell, thick with storm clouds, thunder rolling like cannons across the desert. Eli Turner said, "We can strike his supply wagons tonight." Jack Hawthorne said, "Cut the belly, the beast starves." Amos Pike said, "Starved beasts bite deeper." Maria Devereaux said, "Cole will expect it. He always does." Jack's hand hovered over his revolver, his eyes shadowed by firelight. Eli whispered, "Then we move faster than his shadow." Amos growled, "Speed is a grave's best friend." Jack said, "Then I'll outrun graves till morning." Outside, lightning struck, revealing riders assembling in silence. The ambush carved the night with fire, rifles roaring as wagons toppled, and horses screamed. Jack Hawthorne said, "Drive them into the canyon." Eli Turner fired wildly, shouting, "They're breaking." Amos Pike said, "Hold your ground, or the ground will hold you forever." Maria Devereaux whispered to herself, "This blood won't wash." Sheriff Cole Maddox appeared through the smoke, eyes cold, voice sharp, "You'll hang for this, Jack." Jack fired back, sparks igniting dry brush. Eli said, "We've got them running." Jack muttered, "No, they're drawing us in." The canyon echoed like a tomb. Dawn scraped over the canyon, bodies strewn like forgotten warnings. Eli Turner said, "We lost 2 of ours." Jack Hawthorne said, "The earth takes payment in flesh." Amos Pike said, "You spend men like coin, Jack, but debt grows interest." Maria Devereaux said, "Cole lives, and he will bleed you for this." Jack stared at the rising sun, whispering, "Then I'll bleed first." Eli clenched his rifle, voice cracking, "I'll follow wherever it ends." Amos shook his head, "Ends right themselves in blood." The desert wind carried the stench of smoke and regret. By noon, the town square was lined with nooses swaying in the heat. Cole's justice on display. Sheriff Cole Maddox said, "Order hangs high and low." Jack Hawthorne said, "Order smells like rot." Eli Turner whispered, "He means to make us watch." Amos Pike said, "Fear's the oldest rope." Maria Devereaux said, "Every gallows feeds rebellion." Jack stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the dust, and said, "If law is rope, I'll be the knife." The crowd gasped, and Cole's eyes narrowed like steel drawn from the scabbard. The air thickened, ready to break. The night was restless, wind scraping shutters like fingernails across coffins. Jack Hawthorne said, "Cole owns fear, and fear owns this town." Eli Turner said, "Then we steal it back." Amos Pike said, "You don't steal fear, you choke it before it grows." Maria Devereaux said, "Every whisper in this place carries to Cole's ear." Jack's stare burned across the saloon table, and his knuckles whitened around the bottle. Eli leaned forward, whispering, "He bleeds like any man." Jack said, "Not till I cut deep." A chair creaked, the silence carrying more weight than bullets. Morning broke pale and brittle, dust rolling like smoke across the street. Sheriff Cole Maddox said, "Every coin buys silence, every silence buys peace." Jack Hawthorne muttered, "Your peace reeks of graves." Eli Turner clenched his jaw, "We could rally them if they believed." Amos Pike said, "Belief's a spark, but sparks burn quick." Maria Devereaux whispered, "They'll follow fire, not whispers." Jack stepped into the light, his voice low, "Then I'll burn brighter than coal." The townsfolk peeked from shadows, their fear restless and heavy. The church doors creaked, dust falling like old confessions. Jack Hawthorne said, "This ground remembers every oath broken." Eli Turner said, "Then let's write a new one here." Amos Pike said, "An oath is weight, you can't lay down once carried." Maria Devereaux said, "Words die quicker than bullets." Jack set his revolver on the altar, whispering, "This is no prayer, it's a promise." Eli echoed, "We'll carve it into Cole's name." Amos sighed, "Promises sharpen knives, but dull mercy." The cracked stained glass bled colors over their faces. By afternoon the gallows loomed taller, ropes swaying like silent tongues. Sheriff Cole Maddox declared, "This town lives under law, not shadows." Jack Hawthorne said, "Your law's written in rot." Eli Turner whispered, "They're watching, Jack, every eye waits." Amos Pike muttered, "Step wrong and you hang with words still in your mouth." Maria Devereaux said, "Then speak words worth the rope." Jack raised his voice to the crowd, "Cole doesn't guard you, he cages you." Murmurs stirred like wind before a storm, the first cracks in silence. Night fell heavy, stars veiled, only lanterns daring the dark. Jack Hawthorne said, "He'll strike before dawn." Eli Turner said, "Then we strike at midnight." Amos Pike said, "Midnight's for ghosts, not men." Maria Devereaux said, "Ghosts frighten him more than men." Jack's hand tightened on his revolver, his breath steadying like a clock winding to its last tick. Eli looked at him with fierce trust, whispering, "We'll end this, Jack." Amos sighed, "Endings rarely choose mercy." Thunder rumbled, the desert bracing for blood. The wind screamed across the desert as Jack Hawthorne stood in the churchyard, lantern glow flickering across broken stones. Maria Devereaux said, "You can't win against him, not truly." Jack whispered, "Then I'll bleed trying." Eli Turner said, "Cole's law is smoke, we're the fire that clears it." Amos Pike muttered, "Fires burn out faster than smoke." Jack's hand trembled as Maria's eyes narrowed, and she said, "What if I told you Cole was never your enemy, only his shadow?" Jack's gaze cut sharp. "Whose side are you on?" Her silence cracked louder than thunder, a truth rising unspoken in her eyes. The saloon's back room carried shadows thick as betrayal. Maria Devereaux pressed a folded letter into Jack's hand. She whispered, "Cole is not the master, only the mask." Jack growled, "Then who wears the face beneath?" Eli Turner said, "Jack, don't listen, she's stalling." Amos Pike said, "Truth wears many coats, son, but knives all cut the same." Jack opened the letter, the ink bleeding with secrets, and his eyes darkened. He said, "It was you, Maria. You've played both hands." Maria's lips quivered. "I chose survival, not sides." Jack slammed the table. "You chose his bed over my brother's grave." Silence cut sharper than steel. The courthouse square filled with whispers as Cole Maddox stepped forward, voice calm as poison. Sheriff Cole Maddox said, "Every story has a liar, and now you see yours." Jack Hawthorne shouted, "You used her as bait. You fed us lies." Maria Devereaux said softly, "I was chained, Jack. You think I wanted his hand?" Eli Turner muttered, "Chains or not, you broke us." Amos Pike said, "A fox caught in a trap chews its leg, but she chewed ours." Cole smiled cold, "Your army shrinks while mine grows." Jack raised his revolver, his voice shaking, "You won't have my soul." The canyon echoed with gunfire as Jack's men clashed with Cole's riders, dust rising in choking cloud. Eli Turner yelled, "We're holding them back." Jack Hawthorne fired steady, saying, "Hold nothing, strike harder." Amos Pike growled, "Strike too hard and you'll break your own hand." Maria Devereaux shouted, "They're circling us, it's a trap." Jack snarled, "Let them circle, I'll cut my way out." Bullets sparked off stone, and Cole's laughter carried on the wind. "You'll die here, Jack." Jack whispered, "Better here than chained to your lies." The canyon burned with fury. Night drowned the canyon and smoke clung to every stone. Jack Hawthorne's chest heaved as he stared at Maria, her face pale with guilt. She whispered, "I led you here, Jack, but not for him, for you to see truth." Eli Turner said, "Truth doesn't dig graves, bullets do." Amos Pike said, "Sometimes truth is the grave." Cole Maddox stepped from shadows, revolver steady. "This ends, Jack, one way only." Jack raised his gun, voice iron, "Yes, with you buried under your law." The canyon held its breath, waiting for the first shot to decide fate. The canyon floor was a furnace of smoke and echoing gunfire, each shot ringing like a death knell. Jack Hawthorne said, "Cole, step into the open and face me." Sheriff Cole Maddox replied, "You think you've earned that right?" Eli Turner shouted, "Jack, it's a trap!" Amos Pike grunted, "Traps only snap if you step careless." Maria Devereaux whispered, "Don't do this, Jack, you'll die in his shadow." Jack's eyes burned, "Better his shadow than my silence." Cole's boots struck stone like war drums, and the canyon closed around them like a coffin. Lightning split the storm overhead, shadows stretched long across the canyon walls. Cole Maddox said, "You've always been a weapon, Jack, just one I never finished sharpening." Jack Hawthorne spat, "You turned graves into currency." Eli Turner said, "Jack, take the shot." Amos Pike hissed, "Shots aren't answers, they're echoes." Maria Devereaux said, "Don't let him own your rage." Jack growled, "Rage is all I've got left." Cole's revolver glinted, steady as judgment. For a moment, the storm and silence struck together. Gunfire tore the silence, sparks flaring as bullets carved stone. Jack Hawthorne roared, "This ends now." Cole Maddox snarled, "Ends were written before you crawled from the dust." Eli Turner cried, "Jack, down!" Amos Pike pulled him aside, gritting, "Stay alive, boy." Maria Devereaux screamed, "Stop this before it takes you both!" But Jack surged forward, revolver flashing, every step dragging his ghosts behind him. Cole advanced too, eyes bright with cruel certainty, both men colliding in smoke and steel like fate itself had demanded it. The ground shook with thunder as Jack and Cole circled, faces carved by hate and regret. Jack Hawthorne said, "You took my blood, my brother, my peace." Cole Maddox sneered, "And I'll take your name last." Eli Turner whispered, "Don't let him break you, Jack." Amos Pike growled, "A broken man still cuts deep." Maria Devereaux cried, "Jack, if you kill him, you become him." Jack answered cold, "Then so be it." The storm cracked above, lightning painting the canyon like judgment's fire. The final shots cracked, time slowing to a breath, smoke swirling in ribbons. Jack Hawthorne's revolver roared, and Cole Maddox staggered, blood painting dust black. Cole gasped, "Law dies with me." Jack said, "No, law begins without you." Eli Turner dropped his rifle, whispering, "It's done." Amos Pike closed his eyes, sighing, "Graves write the last word." Maria Devereaux's tears cut paths through soot as she said, "You've killed him, but what's left of you, Jack?" Jack holstered his gun, silence louder than thunder, the canyon holding its verdict. Dawn crept slow over the canyon, bleeding soft gold across the jagged rocks and smoke-stained sky. Jack Hawthorne stood with shoulders slumped, revolver holstered but spirit heavy, staring at Sheriff Cole Maddox, body sprawled lifeless in the dust. Eli Turner said, "It's done, Jack, it's finally over." Jack shook his head, voice rough, "Nothing ends, Eli. Death doesn't close wounds, it carves them deeper." Amos Pike muttered, "Every grave is just another sentence written in the desert's book." Maria Devereaux whispered, her voice shaking, "You've beaten him, but the victory tastes like ash." Jack's lips parted in a bitter smile. "I didn't win, Maria. I just outlived him." The wind rose, carrying the faint stench of gunpowder and blood, scattering grit across the stones as though the desert itself tried to bury the memory. Jack's shadow fell long, a man weighed down not by triumph, but by the silence of all he couldn't save. The town stirred uneasily, shutters creaking open, whispers spreading faster than the morning light. Jack Hawthorne stood in the square, boots planted firm, watching faces peek from windows, fear shifting into cautious wonder. Eli Turner said, "They're waiting, Jack, waiting for you to tell them what comes next." Jack's jaw tightened, his voice carrying low, "I won't lead them into another cage. Eli, they'll need to stand on their own." Amos Pike muttered, "Stand too tall and they'll trip in your shadow." Maria Devereaux said, "They don't need another tyrant. They need a chance to breathe without fear choking them." Jack lifted his gaze to the gallows, rope swaying empty for the first time, wood groaning like a monument stripped of purpose. "Cole built this town on silence," Jack said, "so choice is all I'll leave behind." The people watched him, not with worship, but with the fragile hope of those who have seen chains fall. Inside the saloon the air felt strange, no longer thick with fear but hollow with possibility. Jack Hawthorne leaned on the bar, untouched whiskey before him, staring at the cracked mirror, as though searching for a face he'd lost long ago. Eli Turner said, "This town's different now. It doesn't stink of Cole's boots anymore." Jack's voice rasped, "It still stinks of ghosts." Amos Pike sighed, "Hope's a dangerous liquor, stronger than whiskey, harder to sober from." Maria Devereaux stepped closer, her voice steady but low. "You carry their eyes now, Jack, every man, woman and child. Whether you want it or not, they see you as their chance." Jack laughed without humor. "I don't want their eyes, Maria. I just want them to live free, not buried under another man's law." The saloon creaked, every board remembering violence, yet for the first time its silence wasn't fear. It was breath, fragile but alive. At the hilltop church, the cracked bell finally rang, its sound jagged but defiant, echoing across the town like a wound-finding voice. Jack Hawthorne stood at the steps, his hand resting on the dented tin star he had left there days before. "My brother should have heard that bell for a wedding, not for war," Jack said, his voice breaking under the weight of memory. Eli Turner whispered, We carry him every time it rings, Jack, every time we stand. Amos Pike said, "The dead don't need bells, but the living do, to remind them not to sleep under silence again." Maria Devereaux whispered, "Then let this sound be a beginning, not another ending." Jack nodded, whispering, "He rests now. Maybe so do I." The cracked bell swung again, its flawed voice echoing across desert and sky, carrying both grief and fragile promise into the horizon. The desert road stretched endless beneath a sky painted in fire and fading violet, the horizon swallowing light like it swallowed men. Jack Hawthorne walked alone, boots crunching the dirt, his figure shrinking against the vastness. Eli Turner called out, voice trembling, "Where will you go, Jack?" Jack said without turning, "Anywhere silence follows me." Amos Pike muttered, "The road's longer than grief, boy, and grief has no end." Maria Devereaux asked softly, her voice carrying on the wind, "Will you ever return?" Jack paused, shadows stretching long across the sand, whispering, "Some ghosts don't come home." He lifted his hat low, turned his back to them, and walked into the setting sun. The town behind him exhaled its first true breath of freedom, but the man who bought it with blood faded into legend, swallowed by desert and sky.